Okay, today I am reviewing Murder at Hazelmoor, also called The Sitterford Mystery by Agatha Christie. This story takes place in Dartmoor, and it's in the wintertime. And the story begins in the same way that it ends. So Christie uses a framing device. In the beginning of the story, several people have come together at the home of Captain Trevelyan, and this home has been rented to two women, Mrs. Willett and her daughter Violet. And the ladies come from South Africa, and they're in the habit of inviting the community over for tea or for an evening of games and bridge or something like that. Well, one of the young people gets it into their heads that they are going to have they're going to have a little seance or do table turning, as they say. So what they do is they grab a round table, everyone sits around it, and puts their hands down, and then suddenly they ask if there's a spirit present, and the spirit knocks. So essentially, generally what's happening in these is someone is knocking under the table, and then in order to spell out messages, instead of using like a Ouija board like more people used later on when that became popular, the spirit would supposedly spell out using the letters of the alphabet. So it would give one knock for A, two for B, and so on. And they are sitting there and they get a message from someone, and it starts to spell out the name Trevelyan. Now, Trevelyan is the name of the man who owns the house that they're all in, but he is in the next town. He has changed accommodations for the winter and is renting this home to these two women from South Africa. And he's not at this party. So they ask the spirit if it means Trevelyan, Captain Trevelyan, and it gives them one rap for yes. Then it spells out the word dead. And then the next thing the spirit spells out is the word murdered. And everyone freaks out. They turn on the lights and they think that's really a horrible trick for someone to play, and they all kind of wonder who in their group would ever play such a thing. Or was it actually a spiritual being that has given this message? And the person who's most disturbed by it is another old gentleman, a good friend of Captain Trevelyan's, and his name is Burnby. And Mr. Burnby he lives in a house that Trevelyan built near his larger house, and he's so worried that he decides to go out in the snowstorm and walk the 6 miles to Trevelyan's house and check and see that he's okay. He gets there, he finds the window open, and it looks like it's been forced, so he goes to get the police. They go in and they find that Trevelyan has indeed been coshed on the head. They find him at about 8:30. The doctor comes over and says this must have happened at around 5:30, and then Burnaby realizes that it was right at 5:30 that they got this message, and so the whole story is about finding out who killed Captain Trevelyan. And the real sleuths in this story, there's Detective Narracott, who comes from Scotland Yard, and he's the main police detective on the case. But there's a young woman named Emily Trefusis, and her husband, or I'm sorry, her fiance is suspect number 1 because he's a nephew of Trevelyan, and he stood to inherit quite a bit, and he was in the town the night that the man was murdered. So he's in prison, and Emily enlists the help of a young reporter named Charles, and together they make kind of a detective team. And really, they keep the pulse of the story moving along. And you really, I think one of the fascinating things about this story is that Emily, she solves the crime at the end by finally visiting Trevelyan's house, going to the scene of the crime, and sitting in his bedroom. And she's, with the help of some missing boots that she finds, she's able to figure everything out. And just by sitting there, and I couldn't help but feel like this is kind of like Christie. I thought I saw a lot of Agatha Christie in Emily. Like, she sits there, maybe in front of her typewriter, kind of puzzling through, looking at these clues that she's made. And maybe for Christie, she's working backward to try and cover up the story to make it more mysterious for the reader. But there seemed a real strong connection there. So Emily solves the case with the help of Charles and Inspector Narracott and a mysterious man in the village named Duke. And the story is really... it actually owes a lot to Arthur Conan Doyle and his masterpiece, the Hound of the Baskervilles, because the Hound of the Baskervilles also takes place on Dartmoor. This story, some of the similarities, of course, the moor. This story has an escaped convict, and Doyle's story has a man escaped from a lunatic asylum, and this one has some missing boots. That one has some missing boots. No large dog or anything like that. As far as the book goes, I had heard a recording of this, an audio recording from the BBC of this a number of years ago, so I knew the solution to the story. There's a rather strong clue that Christie puts right at the beginning and alludes to twice more that I'm not sure if it's because I've read it before, but it seemed a rather obvious clue to me. It grabbed my attention right away, and I think even if I hadn't known the story and the solution beforehand, I would have figured it out. But she never alludes to it. It becomes, in a way, a kind of an Easter egg type clue, one that never gets really fleshed out, but becomes an important clue for the reader if the reader's paying attention. So because of that rather obvious clue, I don't know I could give it a 5. I would say that this one, it's a very solid book. I'm going to give it a, I'm going to give it a 3.75 out of 5. It moves along pretty well. There's a couple of slow spots, but the characters are engaging, and it's a very fun winter read. And of course, the solution comes out at the end when they have another seance, another table turning. So very interesting in that respect. Next time, I'm going to be reading Peril at End House. It's, look at the book says Poirot Returns. So we have another Poirot mystery here. So I'll be reading and reviewing this next. Thanks a lot.